It's been over 4 decades since the release of Blade Runner, but even though the future predicted is now in the past, Blade Runner's vision of 2019 LA is more relevant than ever before. It's still one of the finest visions of a dystopian cityscape, and today, with all the debates on AI, it might be a good time to revisit the world of this iconic movie. For those who aren't familiar with the source novel or the movies, the story is about a group of sentient artificial humans called Replicants who are created to serve as a labor force, and when the Replicants are out of line or go rogue, the Blade Runners are police officers who hunt them down. In this video, we'll focus on the detailed anatomy of Replicants and bring you everything there is to know about them. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What are replicants, and how did these sentient artificial humans come into existence? The replicants are bioengineered humanoid androids that are physically indistinguishable from humans and created generally as a labor force by Tyrell Corporation. They lack basic empathetic abilities, though the more advanced models bridged the gap between humans and robots significantly. A research program named Project Nexus came up with the first production line of replicants that was created by the organization. The first replicant, Nexus 1, was released in the year 2000, and the first few models were created as automatons that were designed to replace humans in certain jobs that were deemed unnecessary, unpleasant, or dangerous. The developments kept happening as the models became more advanced with each Nexus model. By 2009, the Nexus 5 replicants were under development, and the project was led by Dr. Charles Edevane during this time. Nexus 6 came out in 2018, and it was followed by Nexus 7, of which Rachel was one of the most impressive replicants. Later, following the death of Eldon Tyrell, Nexus 8 was rushed to the market, but in 2023, the production of replicants was banned. When Wallace Corporation acquired the properties of Tyrell Corporation following their bankruptcy in 2028, they came up with the new subservient Nexus 9 model of replicant, and it also led to the lifting of the replicant ban in 2036. Exploring some major replicant models and their characteristics. The first replicant model was the Nexus 1, and while it was a revolutionary innovation, it lacked the finesse and expertise that we see in the later Nexus models. It was only when Nexus 3 was developed that the replicants became useful and more than just a smart idea. These were known to be the first replicants that were capable of independent thought and complex tasks. A militia of Nexus 3 models was employed to destroy the Los Angeles slums, and in the violence and chaos that followed, it was deduced that the Nexus 3 could not be reasoned with logically. These replicants also felt pain, and it was decided to take them off the line pretty quickly. Their ability to feel pain was so sickening that it made Blade Runner Rick Deckard retire after his experience killing one Nexus 3 replicant. When the Nexus 4 model of replicants was created in 2009, they were the most advanced ones at the time. These replicants were stronger than humans, and there were some major safety concerns after a pleasure model was blamed for the murder of a lab worker. It was also noted that these replicants would give up when cornered pretty easily. What followed was the Nexus 5 model, and this was stronger and more agile. These replicants were also as intelligent as the designers, and they were obsessed with optimization, seeking a way to find progress in every situation. Eldon Tyrell consistently denied any dangerous defects in these replicants, even though there were reports of a violent event involving one of them. Nevertheless, by November 2019, the organization recalled the last of the Nexus 5 models from off-world colonies. The Nexus 6 models were already in production when the Nexus 5 models were recalled. The Nexus 6 replicants were designed to be more human than all its predecessors. They were virtually identical to humans, and the product was marketed as more human than human. These replicants were extremely powerful and agile, and they had a wider temperature tolerance, allowing them to function in various environments. Their intelligence was also quite advanced, even though it varied depending on the model requirement for work in the off-world colonies. The lifespan of these replicants was only 4 years. However, the heightened intelligence and awareness also had a downside, as there were reports of Nexus 6 combat models going rogue on the off-world colonies. Later, a group of these replicants, led by Roy Batty, hijacked a transport and came to Earth to find a way to extend their lifespans. replicants. He was perhaps the most advanced replicant among the Nexus 6 models. When the founder of Tyrell Corporation, Eldon Tyrell, was killed at the hands of Roy Batty, the remaining unsold Nexus 6 replicants were left to expire in storage. It was also followed by a complete ban on replicants that was only lifted much later by the Wallace Corporation. Even though Eldon Tyrell developed the Nexus 7 replicants, they never progressed beyond the prototype stage. The only known specimens were Rachel, Isabel Selwyn, and a second Isabel Selwyn replicant. They were developed through a top-secret research project, and only the employees completely trusted by Tyrell were involved. Major difference between the Nexus 7 replicants and the previous models was that they could be implanted with real human memories. With earlier models, they would be nearing their expiry date by the time they had enough memories to develop feelings and a sense of identity. However, the Nexus 7 replicants, like Rachel, were developed with an abundance of memories, and they could pass as human almost immediately. In fact, they weren't even aware that they were replicants to begin with. The production process was so accurate that Isabel Selwyn, designed to look identical to the late wife of Alexander Selwyn and supported with her memories, could deceive her daughter Cleo about the fact that her mother had actually died. Their heightened awareness also meant that it took a lot longer to detect their true nature, because they could pass off as humans even in the early stages of the test devised to differentiate between the two. After the murder of Tyrell, the research was completely lost because of its secretive nature, and the Nexus 8 models were rushed out as a replacement. The Nexus 8 replicants were rushed onto the local and off-world markets, and they were built for specific purposes and had a natural lifespan. Their ocular implants made it easier for them to be distinguished from humans, and a database was created to track them down easily. They were mainly used to fight in the off-world war on Calantha, one of the colonies. However, violence soon erupted between humans and replicants, and after the mad experience with the Nexus 6 models, this improved product was not well received. The human supremacist movement was launched in order to hunt down and kill replicants by using the database. A couple of Nexus 8 replicants were responsible for the blackout that led to a complete ban on replicants and their production. Why was the production of replicants banned? An infamous event termed the blackout was what led to the banning of replicant production. This was an unprecedented electricity blackout that affected Los Angeles for several days in May 2022. It was a plan conceived by replicants Iggy Cygnus and Trixie, with the help of a replicant-sympathizing Tyrell Corporation employee who thought of destroying all the servers that have Tyrell Corporation's database of registered replicants. The plan involved the detonation of a nuclear warhead in the stratosphere above Los Angeles so that the city's electrical grid became overloaded by a powerful EMP blast that could erase any trace of electronic data. It was all done so that no information about the replicants could ever be retrieved, and the plan was successful in this regard. However, it led to a complete ban of the production of replicants, and this caused a massive financial downfall for the Tyrell Corporation. It also impacted global economy, and the stock markets crashed, resulting in food shortages across the world. Meanwhile, the Wallace Corporation acquired the bankrupt Tyrell Corporation. With time, they managed to restart the production of a new replicant model and also lifted the ban on the same. How were the new Nexus 9 replicants different from previous models? The Nexus 9 replicants were the first line created by Wallace Corporation after their takeover, and these replicants were created to obey better than previous ones. During a demonstration, when Neander Wallace ordered a Nexus 9 replicant to choose between his own life or that of Wallace, the replicant slit his own throat. This allowed for the ban to be lifted, and aside from this heightened obedience, the Nexus 9 models retained the ocular implant from previous models. They could also have a lifespan as long as the customer desired, instead of the earlier, shorter lifespans of replicants. The replicant played by Ryan Gosling, Agent K, is one of the Nexus 9 replicants, and he's used by the LAPD as a Blade Runner to hunt down the remaining replicants of Tyrell Corporation. Just like Rachel, these Nexus 9 models have also been implanted with false memories, but K is completely aware of his replicant nature. How can someone differentiate between a replicant and a human? The whole point of perfecting the replicants was to come up with a human alternative, and these artificial intelligence-powered humanoids were so identical to humans that it was extremely difficult to differentiate between the two. That being said, there were often situations that required them to be identified and eliminated, and a test was developed to spot them. This test was called the Voight-Kampff test, and the Blade Runners employed to bring down the rogue replicants used this method. The Voight-Kampff test used a machine that could measure body bodily functions like respiration, heart rate, blushing, and pupillary dilation in response to certain emotionally provocative questions. It usually took around 20 to 30 questions to detect a Nexus 6 replicant, but there were some exceptions. When Rick Deckard was performing the test on a replicant named Rachel, it took over 100 questions to determine that she wasn't human. This is because she was an experimental replicant with implanted memories, and this made it more difficult than usual to differentiate between the two. Even though the Voight-Kampff test proved to be effective on almost all replicant models, the advanced Nexus 9 replicants could avoid detection through this method. The idea of such a device was there in the original story by Philip K. Dick titled Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and it was somewhat similar to Alan Turing's work with an artificial intelligence test that could check if a computer could convince a human that it was another human through an interaction. It also has a resemblance with the lie detector test used to measure physiological responses against a lie. Do replicants have emotions? The more advanced replicants, especially those from the Nexus 6 model, were shown to be capable of developing emotionally with time, and for this reason, they were only given a 4-year lifespan so that they didn't develop emotionally. These replicants were self-aware, and they were so much like humans that their identity could be questioned, which is the main existential crisis of the entire Blade Runner franchise. It revolutionized the idea of cyborgs, and Philip K. Dick's original novel described the androids as incapable of feeling empathy. However, Ridley Scott's take on this matter was slightly different, and the replicants in Blade Runner clearly had emotions. Some replicants, like Rachel, had such advanced emotions that it was nearly impossible to distinguish them from the human emotions. Also, it's worth noting that some of the tasks assigned to the replicants required them to have emotions. For example, Chris, a replicant intended for pleasure, was required to be able to express happiness, pleasure, and affection because nobody would want to be intimate with a dead-eyed robot. Similarly, a soldier replicant should feel pride, triumph, loyalty, and similar complex emotions. Also, if you consider the replicants with implanted memories, they're clearly going to show signs of emotion because of the memories that they possess. Are the replicants aware that they're not human? In order to keep someone submissive, the individual's awareness ought to be kept in check, and it's not much different for replicants as well. In order for replicants to effectively obey humans, it's important that they don't develop a level of awareness that surpasses human capacity. In this regard, an important question that comes up is about the level of awareness a replicant has to know that they're not human. We've seen different types of replicant models react differently, and someone like Rachel, for instance, is given false memories of her creator, Eldon Tyrell's niece, and this helps her maintain the illusion that she is human. On the other hand, Nexus 9 models like Agent K are completely aware of their replicant identity. Even the replicants who know that they're not human have false memories implanted in them, and a replicant can even be made to work as a Blade Runner, which we've seen among the Nexus 6 models employed in such roles. The awareness of a replicant is more controlled in the advanced variants, and the Nexus 9 model regularly performs a baseline test to confirm that they always operate within set parameters. Why are replicants a better choice than humans to be Blade Runners? One of the biggest examples of how artificial intelligence can replace human labor has been shown through the simple example of a replicant replacing a human to become the new Blade Runners. There have been suggestions in the more recent comic book stories that replicants can detect if someone else is a replicant by simply looking at them. Even if they can't detect other replicant models, they can surely detect their own kind, and in contrast, a human Blade Runner needs a lot more time to detect their presence. Humans need to conduct the elaborate Voight-Kampff test or look under the right eye of someone that they suspect is a replicant, and clearly a replicant is a superior choice for the role of a Blade Runner. Do the replicants realize that they have superhuman abilities? As we've explained before, the replicants are basically bioengineered humans who have a set of programming and behavioral inhibitions built in. Thus, even if they are aware of their stronger powers and greater intelligence in some cases, they have inhibitions that keep them enslaved. However, since their nature is very similar to humans, they can learn to overcome these inhibitions with time. In order to prevent this, they were later given shorter lifespans so they could never learn ways to bypass their programming. In fact, most of the replicants are engaged in such dangerous forms of labor that they would die before their designated short lifespan was up. To put it simply, the replicants have nothing preventing them from realizing their superhuman abilities. They're just kept in check through systemic oppression and forced segregation from society. Can replicants reproduce like humans? If you closely inspect Blade Runner 2049, the movie deals with the deep philosophical questions of what it truly means to be human. As we all know, a very essential aspect of humans, or any living organism for that matter, is to reproduce. While the replicants are basically bioengineered beings designed to serve humanity, they do have several human emotions and desires, as we've already discussed in this video. However, most of them are incapable of reproduction, and only a rare instance from Rachel can be observed. But why exactly she's able to do this is left rather ambiguously. It might be because of the complex nature of her body, and she might have some human reproductive organs to make her more human-like than usual. There was also one example of Agent K discovering the buried remains of a replicant woman whose bones revealed signs of childbirth. It's understandable for the organizations creating replicants to not want them to reproduce, because if replicants are able to reproduce, then humans would simply breed them and nobody would buy them from the organization. It's also been assumed by the fans that even for the rare cases of replicant reproduction, it is only possible between two replicants, and not through a crossbreeding between a human and a replicant. This has never been officially stated, but it does look like that from the storyline. Overall, as a general rule, replicants cannot reproduce, and only a few exceptions exist where they have been shown to have this very human ability. Was Rick Deckard actually a replicant? For many, this might come as a major twist in the tale, but the true fans of the Blade Runner franchise always had a hunch that Rick Deckard was actually a replicant. It was always a debate worth having, but Harrison Ford admitted in an interview that he always knew that Deckard was a replicant, even though he denied the theory for decades. Earlier, he felt that the audience must have a major human character that they can empathize with, but the director, Ridley Scott, has always maintained that Deckard was a replicant, even though the character wasn't aware of this. There were plenty of clues lying around that suggested Deckard's true replicant nature. Firstly, the eyes of replicants glow slightly when light hits them in a certain way, and we saw the same with Deckard when he was talking to Rachel. When Rachel asked him if he ever conducted the Voight-Kampff test on himself, he fell asleep before answering. Also, a fellow Blade Runner Gaff always seemed to have a mild disdain for Deckard, and there was a hint that he knew about Deckard's dreams just like Deckard knew about Rachel's. Lastly, Rachel's pregnancy with Deckard being the father was a major giveaway of his true self, because we have already revealed that a replicant could only get pregnant from another replicant. Fans have theorized that Gaff always knew that Deckard was a replicant. Maybe he was specially designed with additional human traits and weaknesses so that he could be a more efficient hunter. Some have also suggested that Deckard was aware of his true nature on a subconscious level, and his drinking habit was simply an attempt to mask the thoughts. Why is the concept of a replicant so eerily accurate today? The scariest part about Blade Runner and the concept of replicants is that what used to be a techno-dystopian depiction of the future seems like a distinct possibility today. It has been over 40 years since Blade Runner was released back in 1982, but the dangers of AI are so relevant today that the creation of something like a replicant in today's time doesn't seem impossible at all. The movie tried to put across some difficult questions back in the day, like what does it mean to be human, and the answer keeps getting more complicated with time as AI-fueled Studio Ghibli images flood the internet and AI dependence keeps getting stronger by the day. Marvelous verdict! Time to enjoy the new Blade Runner show! Finally, after a rather lengthy waiting period, a new Blade Runner project is on its way, and this upcoming Prime Video series is reportedly going to lean more into the aesthetic and ambiance of the original 1982 movie. This might be a delightful piece of news for the Ridley Scott fans, and he will even serve as an executive producer for the show, produced by Amazon Studios. Blade Runner 2099 will preserve the philosophical roots of the franchise, and the central themes like humanity, identity, and moral ambiguity will remain intact. The cast includes the likes of Tom Burke, Michelle Yeoh, Hunter Schafer, Dimitri Abold, and Louis Gribben, among others. Needless to say, I'm stoked as hell about it, and this is one of my most eagerly anticipated sci-fi projects for the near future. Let us know down in the comments what you think about the concept of replicants and their relevance in the current world scenario. Also tell us if you're stoked about the upcoming Blade Runner 2099 or just your favorite Blade Runner moment. Is it dying alone in the snow? Probably not, but let us know down below anyways. As always, if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.